What's going on YouTube? JT's Reborn here, and welcome to a quick little television mini-series review. I don't think I've really done one of these before. Well, I did cover Stephen King's It like a long time ago, but so I just got done watching the final part of the Continental series, the Continental from the world of John Wick. It's a three-part mini-series that is now streaming on Peacock. They aired each part like for the last couple of weeks, and I figured I'd do a quick little video once all three parts were kind of done, because the way it's kind of differently set up, like with a mini series versus like a series, like a TV series or whatnot. So yeah, like like I said, it's a three-part event, which I feel like I haven't watched like events kind of like this in a long time, but I was really excited. For those who don't know, I'm a huge John Wick fan. I think I've covered pretty much all the movies on the channel at some point. With after the movies, well, maybe I didn't do the first one, but I love John Wick. I love it. I love the world. Keanu Reeves is awesome. Ian McShane, who plays Winston, fantastic. The whole cast, the action, the high quality involved with the action and the storytelling and the jokes and just everything about the John Wick series. Like, there's so much like craft behind every single frame. It's a fascinating world too that you kind of want to see explored a little bit more, and so that's kind of what the show does. So there is no John Wick in this series per se. The storyline is set in the 1970s, and they make sure to remind you of that with their song selections. I mean, my goodness, every 5 seconds I feel like some other song pops up to remind you, hey, it's the 1970s, hey, it's the 1970s, hey, it's the 1970s. But you know, I didn't really have much of a problem with that. But yeah, so this is a prequel spinoff of sorts to the John Wick franchise. Like I said, the focus of this this series is on the character of Winston, and you also see a young Sharon. So Winston, if you don't remember, was Ian McShane's character. He runs the Continental in the John Wick and the 4 John Wick movies that we've seen so far. And of course, coming out next year, we also have the movie Ballerina, which is a spinoff of the John Wick stuff. And there's been some comic books too. Maybe I should cover the John Wick comic books at some point. I mean, I love John Wick, and I've watched every John Wick movie opening night in the theaters. Like, I got to get my John Wick fix whenever it comes out. Like, when the first one came out, it just kind of came out of nowhere. It was a really nice surprise. It like became like my favorite movie that year. And then John Wick Chapter 2 came out, and probably still my favorite of the 4 films. I got to watch 4 a couple more times, really kind of like see if I like agree with that. But man, John Wick Chapter 2, like, that one's amazing. 3 is also really amazing too. Like, the first 20 minutes of John Wick 3 is like pure perfection. Then it kind of drags a little bit towards the middle, but then it like picks up again towards the end. There's a little bit too much like dialogue heavy stuff that kind of gets like a little bit confusing at times in terms of the plot. Like, the plot of like 1 is like pretty simple, easy to follow. 2, like, also as well, and this one, like, he's excommunicado, then he's trying to find his purpose and all that. Still amazing, still incredible, but I think I like 2 a little bit more. Although the first 20 minutes of 3 is just spectacular. And then, of course, this past, earlier on this year, I made a video on this one already. John Wick Chapter 4, action movie masterpiece. Once again, this 4-part, like, movie series, just incredible. So, when they announced they were going to do a TV series prequel spinoff, I was in. I mean, if you get the same creative team involved, the world is very interesting. Like, I want to know how this world, like how far its reaches, like how it was formed and all that. Now, we don't really get all those answers like within this particular series, because it's just the main story is just, like I said, it's how Winston came into power with the Continental. That's kind of it. There's more to it than that, but that's in essence what it's kind of leading to. This is how Winston sort of came to be, if you will. So the focal point centered around him. We also learned in the past that he had a brother named Frankie, and we also see a young Sharon in there, and we also find out who was in charge of the Continental before Winston took over, and it's a very over-the-top Mel Gibson, which we'll get to him in a second. But yeah, so the show is called The Continental, and then colon or whatever, from the world of John Wick. They have to mention John Wick in there because a lot of people won't really know that this is a spinoff. So none of the other actors from the movies like are back in this thing. It's just kind of younger versions of the characters. Now, you also have to factor in this is a 3-part TV miniseries, if you will. It's not it's not organized like a season of a TV show. I guess you could kind of like compare it to something like the Benedict Cumberbatch Sherlock show, where they have 3 like hour and a half like episodes, if you will. That's kind of the case for this thing. The first episode's like an hour and a half. Second episode's like an hour and like 20 minutes or something like that. And the third episode's over an hour, like almost an hour and 40 minutes. So like three, like it's basically sitting like through three movies, if you will, kind of combined into one. So it's a little bit too short for like a long-term television series, but it's a little bit long for a movie in terms of the story that they're trying to tell. So I was really excited to watch this thing. I've been watching every single episode for the past few weeks. I will say that I still prefer the John Wick movies over the John Wick TV like prequel spinoff, despite the fact that the show has more time to kind of tell its story. I think the movies, it's easier to follow John Wick. Chad Stahelski, the director of all four films, did not come back to direct this thing. You don't have the same writer on it, if I'm not mistaken. So, but it still has that John Wick, like the amazing action that you'd expect from the John Wick series. Not as good as in the films. Like I said, Chad Stahelski wasn't the one behind the directing, and he directs action so incredibly well. And plus, like I said, this is a TV series, so it's not going to be quite up to quality in terms of the action from the movies, but there is some really, really good action sequences, especially like the first episode with the character of Frankie, who is Winston's older brother, and like this opening like gun battle inside the Continental, the way it's kind of all set up, and I thought that was amazing. I was like, oh snap, that's awesome. And then like I think it was the second episode maybe, or some of the, like, because it's three parts, some of it kind of blend together, and I just got done watching the third part, like where the fact that like there's a part where somebody gets like smashed with an iron in the back of their head, like hand put down a garbage disposal, and like you see like like that's some pretty cool crazy stuff in there, and I really like some of those aspects to it. And like I said, it was kind of cool to have a nice period piece thing set in the 1970s. Now there are some flashbacks to the 1950s where we do see a very young child, Winston, and his older brother, and how they kind of ended up where they're at and that going on with this thing. So yeah, you got that stuff going on here. But again, the main storyline this time around is about how Winston, in essence, came into power with the Continental. So it starts out, we have his brother Frankie, who is stealing a coin press, which is where they make those little currency things, from Mel Gibson's, who's in charge of the Continental. Stealing this coin press in here, and then it causes this whole chaos thing. Mel Gibson, who's... Okay, we'll get to Mel Gibson in a second. He's the only real actor that I recognize in this thing. Well, actually, no, that's not true. I recognize, like, the young Charlie, like, David Patrick Kelly's character from, like, the first movie, and I guess deleted scene in the second film. He's in there. He's played by Dorian Tyrell from The Mask, like, you know, Dorian, whatever his last name was, from The Mask. I'm like, hey, it's you. And he was also in Pulp Fiction, if I'm not mistaken. But anyways, so we see a young him, we see a young Sharon, we see a young Winston. Winston is kind of brought in from overseas by Mel Gibson. He's kidnapped, and then he's like, you got to track down your brother Charlie, or like things are going to get pretty crazy here, because like he kind of used that was like kind of like his leverage over the high table, if you will. We have an adjudicator that shows up in this thing, and like I said, if it's kind of more like focused on like world building than anything else. I don't think the story is quite as strong as it was in the John Wick films. I think because John Wick is just focused really just on John Wick. I mean, there's other characters involved, but it's an easier story to get into. Here you got like, and I'll admit, like the first time I watched the first part, it was a little bit jarring how it kept jumping around to different things. I mean, there's multiple characters to kind of follow throughout this thing. You have Winston and his brother. You have these siblings who run a martial arts dojo. And then you have this cop who's like kind of screwing her boss, if you will, and she's trying to track down Winston and his brother Frankie and all that. And you also have Mel Gibson snorting all sorts of drugs and going over the top crazy and saying the most ridiculous like New York accent. He's like, yeah, that's right, we're here in New York. Like he talks just like that. And I was laughing every time he was on screen. Like, if you want to know how Mel Gibson is portrayed, like his character is in the show, if you've seen South Park and their portrayal of him, that is an accurate representation of how he's portrayed in the show. Like he's exactly like as in this show as over the top as he is in South Park. And I was laughing my ass off every time he was just like allowed to go, like, especially the third part is when he really gets to go and chew the scenery. It was hilarious. Like I couldn't, like, he made for an entertaining villain because he just, like I said, knowing how crazy he is and that with like, you know, all this stuff going on with Mel Gibson, like, and just seeing him in the show, like I was like laughing my ass off. So, and I know not a lot of people aren't big Mel Gibson fans, but like I said, as somebody who watches South Park and just seeing the way he acted on that and then on here, I laughed my ass off in it. But anyway, so I guess we'll get into some spoilers for the show. So if you don't want to know it, I did enjoy the series overall. It's 3 parts. Don't think it's quite as good It's nowhere near as good as the movies themselves, but you have to factor in this is a TV setting. It's set in the 1970s, and they make sure to remind you of that every 5 seconds because there's some sort of 1970s song that's playing constantly. Great music, by the way. I love music from the 70s, but it gets like like every 5 seconds, like, hey, it's the 70s. Throw on this track. Throw on this track. Throw on this track. And there's some great music in there, and like I said, it's an excellent soundtrack. I wouldn't mind listening to, but I also kind of miss like the awesome score from the John Wick films that's kind of present throughout. Like, because I mean, they do have music, I think, within the John Wick movies, but it's like that score is really pretty iconic in that. I kind of like that orchestral angle. But hey, this is a very different feel to it. It's a TV series or a TV miniseries set in the 70s. We do see Winston. The actor who plays him actually does a pretty good job. It's a little bit harder for me to buy this as a young Ian McShane as much as, like, say, the young actor playing Sharon was, or the actor playing Charlie. I don't know, because Ian McShane just has a distinct voice and, like, kind of persona. But then again, this is like 40 years prior to the events of the John Wick film. So, I mean, I could still see elements of it in there. Like, he still has kind of his charm that Winston has in the movies. I thought he did a pretty good job. The guy playing Sharon also was pretty good as well. And then, of course, you had his brother Frankie, who's really only in the first part in this thing. I'm going to get into some spoilers right here. So if you don't want to know what's going on, I recommend check it out. Like I said, it's 3 parts. It's only like 4.5 hours long if you try and binge all 3 parts in it. Like, I think going back and rewatching parts 1, like before I went ahead and like watching part 2 again, it like helped clarify a lot of things as to what was going on, because there are a lot of characters in this thing, and it's not as easy to follow as in the John Wick movies. Because like I said, the focal point is on John Wick and his story and like how we're like eased into that world. Here, like, you're kind of thrown into it. Like, if you don't really know John Wick from beforehand, some of it can be kind of confusing. So, like, this is more for fans of the films. I mean, you probably wouldn't be watching this if you're, like, not a fan of the movies, but it really helps add, like, if you're really into the John Wick world and kind of the lore and all that, like, this is a show more so for you than kind of anything else with what it does. But I think for a 3-part miniseries, if you love John Wick, I think you're going to enjoy this thing. Not quite as much as like the movies themselves, because I think, like I said, Chad Stahelski doing the action just does it on a whole other level. But here we still have some of that humor. We still have some really incredible action sequences. Like I said, there's even a fight scene inside of a phone booth I thought was really awesome. And you get some scenery chewing Mel Gibson, and my God, I was in tears laughing, especially like the third part where he's just he's snorting, he's like sniffing his glue or whatever he's doing, some sort of drugs. He's like, like he's just it's the South Park version of him. But yeah, there's some neat surprises and twists and turns. Especially like within the first part, though. I didn't expect them to kill off, spoilers at this point, Winston's brother Frankie so soon in the series. Because like, oh, we have 3 parts in here. But no, he is pretty much off like right away. And he had kind of his wife there, and then her, and she has some issues with Winston. Like, Winston is not, like, he has people who like get behind him, but he also has people he has like against him. Because there's a lot of characters in this series, it's like there's a lot of different plot lines. And I think, like I said, with the movie focused on just John, it's easier to get into. But this one, you have a lot of different people. And I'm going to be honest, I don't remember everyone's name in this thing. I'll probably watch it again, like maybe a few more times at this point. But again, it's a different feel to it, per se, than John Wick. Like, you get some of the awesome action that you get. It doesn't quite push the envelope as much as the movies do, but it makes sense. It's a TV series. But you still get some really great action. Like, you get some hand-to-hand stuff. You get some violent gunfights. That first gunfight, I thought, was probably the best. You get some great stuff in the third episode. And there's also, like, a really violent scene where... but also kind of funny and, like, pretty creative, too, where some woman has to, like, fight someone, and there's a baby involved. I thought that was pretty good. There's a cool fight scene inside of a phone booth, which they somehow made, like more impactful and a little bit epic there, like, more so than I was expecting. And the way it kind of ends, too, like, with how Winston comes into power, and you get to see a little bit more stuff in terms of the Continental that we haven't seen before, and I do kind of want to know more about the High Table and some of the stuff involved with that, because, like, they reveal a little bit more about some of these things, but they don't quite reveal everything. And that's some of the stuff, like, I still want to know, like, how far in terms of reach this secret society of, like, assassins kind of has. Because we have, like, one character who's a bit of an outsider with this whole thing. Like, she's this cop in the 1970s, is the one who's kind of screwing her boss or whatever. And she has a vendetta against Winston and his brother Frankie because when they were kids, they were forced by Carmack, Mel Gibson's character, to, like, you know, do some sort of arson job but as kids, they didn't know that there was a family in there, but Carmack did because he wanted to toughen them up or whatever. Like she's out to get them. She doesn't quite know about the assassin world. Like even she goes into the Continental, she tries to pay cash for something, and like everyone's like, whoa, 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 you can't be doing that. You got to have those special coins, if you will. So I thought that was kind of interesting, but I do want to know more about like how far does this world reach per se? Like it doesn't feel like, because the series has expanded so much. The first movie felt okay, we're kind of like this small little hitman place, but like as it kept going, it just felt like it kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Like it felt like every like one across the world was like a hitman assassin. So I'm wondering like how far does this thing like secret society, like is there really a secret society or whatnot? I don't know. There's so much mythos around it. Like I want to kind of know like more about that. Like I want to actually fully see like the entire high table. I feel like that's something we've been kind of teased for a while. I want to see like the whole high table together. Like is there one above all, if you will? Per se. But I don't know. Like I said, there's some mystery and intrigue with the whole entirety of the high table. Like I said, there's some cool stuff with the John Wick world, and like there's so much more worth exploring. And I'm looking forward next year to the ballerina spinoff film. I don't know for sure if they're going to do John Wick 5. I know the director has like notes about all sorts of different like action set pieces he wants to do, but they don't have the story down. And I respect the fact that they're not going to do it if the story's not right. Now, the demand, of course, is there. I mean, did you see how awesome John Wick 4 was and kind of how it ended in a little bit of an ambiguous note? But like I said, you got to have the right story. They're all about quality. They're not going to like half-ass it. And I respect the hell out of them for doing that. So many franchises just keep going and going and going, and they don't really put in the work. They kind of get lazier and lazier. But with John Wick, they set out to try and top themselves each time. And you can see that in terms of the craft of like the action and everything else. So hopefully they're able to come up with a really good storyline for a potential John Wick 5. I would love to see it. I mean, Keanu Reeves, I've heard rumblings that he kind of wanted to have his character killed off in 4 because he is getting up there in age. And he's not as fast as he once was in the first film. And of course, like I said, he's also been through hell through all 4 movies, taking quite a beating. But as awesome as he is in the role, like I said, he's getting up there in age. It is really hard on him to kind of do this stuff as he gets older. I'm sure he'd still do it, if like the demand's there and the story's there. But I mean, because people love John Wick. I love the hell out of this franchise so much. I mean, these are such great movies, and the series is pretty good too. Yeah, there's some pacing issues at times where it definitely does drag, and you do feel the length of it over the course of the 3 parts. But there still is enough action, some intriguing world building, and some charismatic performances to kind of get you through it. Not as captivating as the films themselves, and I wouldn't expect that going into it because I knew Stahelski wasn't directing it, and I don't think it had the same right, but they were producers on it. But for a prequel to John Wick, focusing on Winston, I thought it was quite good. There's still more I do want to see explored within this stuff. I don't know if they'll ever do a second season or a second series of this. I feel like they're pretty much going to kind of leave it as is, which I'm okay with. But there's still more stuff I'd like to see explored within the John Wick universe, if you will. Next year, we got the ballerina thing, which Keanu Reeves is back in that one, but I guess that's set between 3 and 4. So we'll see how that thing turns out. I really like this thing. Mel Gibson, super crazy, over the top, overacting, like with the, kind of like his accent's so bad, but it's also like so funny at the same time. And just like I said, it's him on South Park. Like if you get a kick out of his portrayal on South Park, it's basically his performance in this thing, and so I was getting a kick out of that. But yeah, as somebody who's a fan of the John Wick franchise and watched all 3 parts of this, like, it's something I definitely like check out, like if you're a fan of it. Not as strong as the films, but for a 3-part 70s prequel focusing on Winston, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it for sure. And I like I said, I like the 70s aesthetic to it and just kind of the look and feel of it set in the day. The music is also quite good. Like I said, it definitely like tries to remind you every 5 seconds it is the 1970s. Some storylines aren't as captivating as others. I think there's a lot of characters in this thing, and some of them get the focal points, and they're just not as interesting as other characters within the John Wick universe. But I think they did a pretty good job trying to balance everybody out and all that stuff kind of going on with it. So yeah, there you go. There's my quick, well, not really quick, thoughts on the Continental from the world of John Wick. Did you watch all 3 parts? What do you think of it? Are you going to binge it all now or whatnot? Let me know in the comment section down below. Be sure to like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe to the YouTube channel for more content, hit the bell for notifications, all that other fun stuff. And that's going to be it in terms of videos for today, I suppose. I'm going to try and see Exorcist Believer tomorrow. But I want to get this thing out here because, like I said, it is John Wick. I'm a mega John Wick fan. I mean, the series is so fucking good. So I wanted to talk about it. But anyways, that's all I have to say. As always, take care now. Bye-bye then, and I will see you all in the next video. Peace out.